Welcome to 60 Skills. The topic of today's lesson is how to develop your subtle senses. The three senses we will be dealing with today are clairvoyance, or your subtle sense of sight, clairaudience, or your subtle sense of hearing, and clairgustance, your subtle sense of taste. Some may notice that the subtle sense of touch is not covered in this lesson. It is not covered here as it has already been addressed through the exercise most of you know as build the ball. Clairsentience is actually engaged through pore breathing in the skin, and the exact nature of this will be discussed later on in this specific course. So I thank you for joining me today and look forward to working with you as we develop your subtle senses. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss the requirements for training clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairgustance. The physical requirements are quite simple. You will require a notebook or journal, a writing device, a timing device, and a quiet place to practice. As you become more proficient at performing the exercises in this course, you will no longer require a quiet place to practice in. In fact, you will want to go out in public to have additional objects to work with. However, while you do not require having completed the Build the Ball course to do these exercises, being able to pore breathe or generate vital energy will greatly accelerate your performance of these exercises. An introduction to pore breathing and the generation of vital energy is part of this course. But if after performing the exercises for a while you are not happy with your progress, consider reviewing the Build the Ball exercises. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss how clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairgustance, and to a degree clairsentience are trained. The easiest way to describe this is training these skills requires a combination of active visualization and active sensation. Learning how to pore breathe or generate vital breath via exercises like Build the Ball essentially activates your clairsentience or subtle sense of touch. When you are able to generate this energy upon demand, it is combined with active visualization. At this point, you visualize and sensationalize, for lack of a better word, moving energy into and out of the eyes, into and out of the ears, into and out of the nose, and into and out of the tongue. Doing this essentially does two things. One, it builds some kind of tissue within the body that allows these subtle senses to work. And two, it also empties out any obstructions in the body that are preventing them from working. So this is a two-part process of essentially esoteric hygiene on the one hand, and a kind of esoteric weightlifting on another. The classical term for this technology is known as the Qi circulation form. And while this is a science unto itself, we will be using a little bit of this art in order to conduct these exercises. So keep in mind, as we continue in this course, the primary exercises you are learning for this are designed to build those subtle apparati up and to clear them out at the same time. For this reason, when you initially practice, be aware that a bunch of energetic junk will come out of the body. The energy in the room afterwards will feel very dirty. So you are going to want to ventilate the place, perhaps burn some incense, wash the floors, open the windows, allow sunshine in. After your first couple of sessions practicing these exercises, this will no longer be an issue. Also, as a practical matter, I've seen the energy that comes out of the ears to be the dirtiest of the bunch. I suspect this has something to do with the fact that modern people frequently use earbuds, and this does something to the tissue around the ears energetically. It is an interesting observation. Now, in the beginning of the introduction, we mentioned that clairsentience won't really be trained here. If you have already learned an exercise like build the ball and can pour breathe and generate vital energy, well, that is clairsentience. It's your subtle sense of touch. While you do not need that to train these exercises, it is extremely helpful. Active visualization will work as well. However, it will take a little bit longer if that subtle sense of touch is not already developed. We will have an introduction to that in this course, but keep in mind if you're not satisfied with the results you are getting after a month or two, that it might be worth engaging in some other training. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss the relationship to the body between clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairgustance. One of the reasons why the development of your subtle senses takes so long and is so complicated, and a fact that is not well understood by many people in the esoteric community, is the fact that it really depends on what kind of subtle sense you want to develop. The fact of the matter is, the subtle sense for seeing vital energy, and seeing astral energy, and seeing mental energy actually represent 3 different kinds of development. In this course, we will primarily be dealing with vital energy, as this is the easiest to visualize. But understand, as you gain the ability to generate other energies, to include Akasha and non-dual light, these can also be used to train your subtle senses. And ultimately, the kind of clairvoyance and the kind of clairaudience and the kind of clairgustance you develop has a lot to do with the kind of energy you train those sense gates with. So this is a very curious thing. Just keep in mind that the same exercises you're learning today that are utilizing vital energy via pour breathing can also be trained with astral energy, can be trained with mental energy, can be trained with the Kabbalistic letters, can be trained with Akasha, can be trained with non-dual light, and can even be trained with the energy of the planets. All of these things will develop a distinctly different kind of clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairgustance. So that's an important aspect to understand. There is also the elemental aspect of training these subtle senses. When you are training your subtle sense of sight, this is primarily working with fire element in the body, and it reinforces will. When you are training your subtle sense of hearing, clairaudience, you are training elemental air, and this tends to elevate the intellect. When you are training clairgustance, or your subtle sense of smell and taste, you are training elemental earth. Clairsentience, on the other hand, your subtle sense of touch, that you learn from things like building the ball exercises, trains elemental water within the body. This again is also curious. Now later on in this course, you will learn how to train the elements directly. You will also learn how to establish equilibrium and engage things like Akasha and non-dual light. However, in the beginning, you want to train your sense gates with vital energy, as this will tend to reinforce the vital aspects of the elements within the body. Just as training the astral version trains the astral aspects, the mental aspects, so on and so forth. As a practical matter, most people who are drawn to these arts are already highly empathic, and empathy is a form of clairsentience or subtle sense of touch. As this is something that most people have already become familiar with, it will not be contained within this course. Just understand that these drills that you are going to learn in a few minutes work just fine without that. They do work better, however, if you can generate vital energy via pour breathing cleanly. So, welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss the timelines for developing your subtle senses. Here's the bad news. Unless you are naturally gifted clairvoyant, or unless you are naturally gifted clairaudient, development of these skills usually takes a while. In general, you need to perform at least 100 hours of each one of these exercises to develop a base level ability with any of these subtle senses, assuming you do not have a natural gift. And keep in mind, that's 100 hours of practice per energy type. It's really not a very fast process. But this is actually something you want. Development of these subtle senses can be a bit disturbing. So the simple fact of the matter is, you want these things to come on slowly. When they're really crystal clear, they're just that. You'll see things as if they're standing right in front of you. The important part here is that we are using the exercise to develop control over that aspect of our senses. So, when you're practicing, you clearly want to visualize the energy coming on and the sense coming on, and the energy leaving and the sense going off. Now, the different kinds of clair skills you develop also determine what you are going to see. For example, if you are working with vital force or vital energy, the kind of things you are going to see is like a light white haze around things. And the size of that will generally indicate how vital someone is. If you see something amazingly clearly, and that is very colorful, then you're probably seeing into the astral. If you are seeing a very white, very thin kind of outline of something, that's generally seeing into the mental. Now, this is also something you want to think about. Training the vital doesn't cost you a whole lot. And by that I mean, if you are looking at non-physical entities, these things lack bodies, which means they lack breath, which means they can't generate their own energy. So if you want to see one of these things in all their glory, in an astral sense, you are going to have to provide the energy for their subtle body to reflect off of. So seeing things with astral energy is actually quite energetically expensive to the practitioner. On the other hand, seeing things at a mental level isn't very expensive. It's pretty easy after a certain point. And at a vital level, what you're looking at is the radiation of vital force off of something. So if something lacks vital force, you won't see anything. So these training timelines need to be kept in mind when you're beginning to do these exercises. Also, these training timelines largely correspond to the kind of energy you're using. So if you want to see the Kabbalistic letters, for example, it's going to take you at least 100 hours of practice with the Kabbalistic letters to get there. Vital, so on, astral, so on, mental, so on, akashic, so on, etc., etc. So understand that development of these subtle senses can take quite some time. Additionally, and this is the bad news, the older people get before they learn how to activate their subtle senses, typically the longer it will take. Now the good news is if you're very disciplined, you can still get there. That said, I've known many people who trained with people above about 40 to 45, and frequently they were just never able to devote enough time to get over that hump. Also keep in mind that for as many people out there who have a natural affinity for clairvoyance or clairaudience, there are also people who lack an affinity for it. So what I'm getting at is, this is one of those skills where grinding out the work, simply doing practice over and over and over again, is really your best approach. In a lot of cases, you just drill and drill and drill and nothing happens, and then one morning you wake up and all of a sudden it's there. Things like the weightlifting exercises seem to be very useful at accelerating development of clairvoyance, for example. But again, this is not something you should be in a rush to see. Simply put, it could take a few weeks, it could take a few months, or depending on how much natural ability you have and the age at which you begin training these things, it could take substantially longer. All I can say is if you really want the ability, it will eventually come. You may just have to end up doing a lot more work than other people. Life is unfair. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss lifestyle adjustments regarding clairsentience, clairaudience, and clairgustance. Okay, you've gotten to work, you've gotten your 100 hours in, you've begun to develop the basics of your subtle senses. Here are some things to keep in mind. One of the reasons we can work with other people is because we don't know everything about them. The fact of the matter is, what we don't know about people, more often than not, allows us to easily work with them. Once you develop your subtle senses, you are going to know all kinds of things about all kinds of people. People you run into outside in the regular world, people in your family, people you work with, people you go to church with, so on and so on and so on. Because of this, you're going to see some really amazing things. You're going to see some very beautiful things. You are also going to see some very ugly things. So at this point in time, once you've begun to develop these senses in earnest, you are going to need to apply some real efforts towards esoteric hygiene and lifestyle design. The esoteric hygiene comes in because as a practical matter, it is simply easier to see the dark things than the nice things. It is a weird function of human psychology, but it just seems to be the way it works. So because of this, you are not going to want to engage in anything that makes your energy dirty. Because additionally, like attracts like in the energetic worlds. So this is going to get to a topic a lot of people do not like to address in esoterics. Drug use. Drug use, simply put, punches holes in the matrix that holds your subtle bodies together. If you are doing a lot of this stuff, it's very easy for other things and other energies to slip through those matrices and get into your energetic fields. This in turn is going to change what you see and what you hear. So if you want to have very clear clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairgustance, and you want to be able to live your life freely, you are going to need to avoid intoxicants. Excessive use of intoxicants while training these techniques generally results in drug-resistant schizophrenia. Everyone who has been in this community and trained these things seriously has seen any number of these cases. It is tragic and it is terrible. Simply put, you cannot mix drugs, particularly pot or THC, and these exercises because it damages your control mechanism. And at a certain point, these subtle senses just turn on all the time. This is not fun and can be quite terrifying. So again, if you really want to train your subtle senses, you cannot engage in narcotics use. Alcohol use is kind of on the fence. I've known some people who've gotten away with it. I've known other people who said it makes their clairaudience go crazy and they just start hearing voices all the time. That one you're going to need to feel out. In any event, you are not going to want to do much of it. Interestingly enough, tobacco use, while unhealthy on a variety of levels, actually has the effect of locking the subtle bodies down and shutting these senses off. It's one of the reasons why schizophrenics in particular are almost universally smokers in most developed countries. It's curious, but when asked about this, they'll simply tell you that smoking helps shut the voices off. So let's talk about what goes on as these senses start coming on. Simply put, uncontrolled clairvoyance usually isn't very disturbing because most people can make out the difference between the thing that's there from the other world and the thing that's here in the real world. That's not too bad. If your subtle sense of smell and taste are in overdrive, okay, you notice some weird smells that other people don't notice. You might be a little more sensitive to what you're eating. Again, not that big a deal. However, everyone I've ever talked to who has had problems with this indicated that if your subtle sense of hearing gets out of control, when you start hearing voices all the time, that's maddening. That drives people, as we like to say, crazy. So again, if you truly are going to train these exercises, you need to apply some thought in advance to establish a control mechanism of turning it on and turning it off. Some people, for example, use a precept that says they will only see and hear things in a practice space or in a meditative circle. This is not a terrible idea, although it will cost you some ability out in the phenomenal world in the ability to do things on the fly. But more importantly, you are going to want to put a lot of thought into how you want to live your life. And active avoidance of bad places, bad people, and bad energy are the easiest way to do this. So again, I'm not saying any of this to scare anybody or to make anyone's life difficult, but the simple fact of the matter is, narcotics and bad behavior do not mix well with clairaudient, clairvoyant, and clairgustant training. It will create problems for you. So if you have any of these bad habits, you might want to address that issue before you begin indulging in this kind of training. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now discuss the difference between set piece and free range training of clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairgustance. All right. First, you need to address why you are choosing to indulge in this training. The simple fact of the matter is, clairsentience, as developed through exercises like Build the Ball, allows you to work with virtually any of the energies out there that you could work with. You can actually get quite far with very little clairvoyance or clairaudience. Ultimately, at the end of the day, most people want to engage in spirit magic, or, even rarer, wish to engage the Kabbalistic letters. At this point, your clairvoyance and clairaudience become pretty important. So, how do we go about training that? Well, there's set piece training, which will take place in your meditation chamber or your meditation space. And this is highly focused training, where you learn how to charge the room, you do the exercises you're about to learn now, and you really, as we like to say, hammer down on developing both the pathways and opening those pathways and emptying them out so the subtle energies can function properly. And this is important and should make up the majority of your first 100 hours of practice with each energy you choose to engage in each subtle sense. However, there is also free range training. Now, this will depend upon what control mechanism you choose to establish for engaging in your practice. Again, a simple way to do this is every time you fill the senses with the energy, you go, the energy comes on, the sense comes on, and every time you empty them, the sense goes off. Other people can use a precept to go, all right, I can only engage my subtle senses in a holy place or in a meditation circle. Other people want them on most of the time. Other people want the ability to engage these things outside their sacred space. Fair enough. This is where free range practice comes in. And what you are doing with this is you go into a place in public and you turn a given subtle sense on, see what information you can pick up about the place, and then shut it off. And then you do this in a variety of places. Clairsentience is the easiest way to do this. Clairvoyance and clairaudience obviously will come later on. So you need to understand that whether you are doing set piece practice or free range practice has a lot to do with the control mechanism you choose to put in place to engage that sense. For the purpose of the training you are about to take part in, we are going to be using the control mechanism of when full of energy, the sense is on. When empty of energy, the sense is off. However, once you become proficient with these exercises, you can in turn modify this any way you want. For those of you familiar with the Mala method, you can build a precept around how the subtle sense is used and the kind of information that you want to receive. These are all valuable things. And as you are beginning to see, the training in any one part of this course builds upon other parts. So this is also something to keep in mind. Let us begin. Welcome to 60 Skills. We will now cover your subtle sense of smell. Your subtle sense of smell is actually part of Clairgustance. While we will introduce these as two separate exercises, at the end of this you will actually be performing both at the same time. So first we will start with your subtle sense of smell. This is associated with earth element. So if you are going to practice with the elements in these exercises, you are going to want to use elemental earth. However, for the purpose we are engaging in here, you should utilize vital force for the first 100 hours of this exercise. You will want to perform this exercise as a standalone before adding in the exercise for subtle sense of taste. However, once you have mastered that exercise after a few hours, you will want to combine the two and perform the exercise for your subtle sense of smell at the same time as you perform the exercise for your subtle sense of taste. Let us begin. Start by generating some vital force. Pull the energy into you. Relax. This can be done with eyes closed the entire time if you like. You don't need to have your eyes open for this. So inhale the light and sensation up the nose, up to the top of the nose. If you pull this energy up to the point between the eyes or the head, you are going to get a massive headache. Do not do this. Inhale, pull the light and sensation up to the top of the nose. Exhale, push it out the nose. Inhale, up to the top of the nose, think on. Exhale, push it out the nose, think off. This is one of those senses some practitioners choose to leave on all the time. It is not terribly disturbing, but it will give you an excellent early warning in the event you're coming around something extremely negative or an extremely negative person, and is not generally very disturbing. Inhale through the nose, up to the top of the nose, exhale, out the nose. Now, there is one final detail. As you inhale and pull the energy up to the top of the nose, pull the sides of the nose up a little bit. Pulling up on these muscles in here. Now exhale, off. Inhale, exhale. Do this several times on your own now. Inhale, exhale. On and off. Okay. Now if you've been working with an energy other than vital force, take a few moments to clear that out. You can pause this part of the instruction. If not, Now you will train your subtle sense of taste. Again, the tongue is resting behind the two front teeth or on the roof of the mouth. As you inhale, visualize light coming in, entering the tongue, going down the tongue into the throat, thinking on, exhaling, thinking off. Inhale on, entering the tongue, pulling down the throat, pulling up on the sides of the Adam's apple or sides of the throat a little bit. Exhale, emptying the tongue, thinking off. Some people find it helpful to inhale and exhale through the mouth while doing this. So inhale, down the tongue, into the throat. Exhale, up the tongue, out the mouth. Inhale on. Exhale off. Do this on your own several times. Again, you're going to feel a slight pulling up on the throat as you inhale and fill the tongue. All right. Now, if you are new to these exercises, go ahead and end the recording now and go on to the rest of the course. If you have been practicing the exercise for your subtle sense of smell and your subtle sense of taste for a while, continue. This time, as you inhale, visualize light and the vital sensation going in the nose, up to the bridge of the nose, and down the tongue into the throat at the same time. Inhale, fill the nose, fill the throat, fill the tongue. Exhale, empty the nose, empty the tongue. Inhale, fill the nose, fill the tongue, think on. Exhale, empty, think off. Inhale on. Exhale off. Do this several times on your own now. All right, now if you've been practicing with an energy other than vital energy, go ahead and do several breaths of vital energy to clear the nose and the tongue out. Otherwise, this is the end of the exercise, and you can move on to the next part of the course. Let us begin.